Hey everybody, DJ here. Welcome back. This is going to be part 4 of Fireball simulations in Blender. So if you haven't done the other steps, please make sure you go back and do those so that you know pretty much what we're doing here, which is advanced smoke, sparks, and fire materials. So by the end of this tutorial, you'll be able to make super awesome looking stuff like this here. And I'll show you how to make it so that yours will look pretty much exactly like what you can see in these images. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump inside of Blender here. And this is pretty much where we left off. And what we're going to do before we really get started here is we're just going to turn off a couple things. So let's take the wall here and we're going to turn that off. You could actually click on this and do / on the numpad to just isolate that, but let's just turn off a couple of these things. So let's turn this off and we'll turn off these lights right now. And let's just click on this, hit period, just so that we're zoomed in on this. And what we're going to do here is we're also going to just turn off the sparks. So we're going to turn those off. And it looks like I turned off the render here, so I just turned that back on. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create the awesome materials for the smoke. Now I'm going to be having this in a rendered view and just sort of moving around. But what you can do is if you go to your rendered view, hitting 0, and you go in here to the render region right here, you can then select your camera and choose an area like this. And when you look at this in the rendered view, you can see that it's just that area. And if I move this over, you can see that it's just the fire area like this here. Okay. So if you're having trouble zooming around and seeing things quickly, you can do that to help you out. The other thing you can do is you can go over here to the render settings and go into where it says volumes here. And you see right here where it says viewport, it starts off at a 1, and that will make it a little bit slower in your viewport to render. If you pop this up to about a 3, it will make it a lot easier for you to actually see the rendering here, okay? And you can change the max steps as well. You can increase this or decrease it. If you do it lower, it should, if you have this max step to a lower value, it should be a lot faster for you to render in the viewport, okay? But on your final, you might want to increase this to get a higher quality render. Okay, so let's go to solid mode here. I'm going to come out of the camera view and make sure that your volume, if we go here to the volume, make sure that your noise is deselected. If you have it on, I'm just going to click this on just to show you. You can see that it takes a while. It's a little bit slower in the viewport. And if I'm actually trying to drag around, you can see that it is a lot slower. It does look a lot cooler and all that, but it is a little bit slower. And what we want to do first, let's just deselect the noise there. What we want to do is we want to grab a frame that is a very nice representation of our fireball so that we can start to do our materials. So it's really up to you on what you want to do, but I would say right around here so we can see this nice smoke trail and we can see the fireball here. This is going to be just fine as far as the smoke and the fire. We'll do the sparks later, okay? So let's go ahead and split this panel, and we're actually going to move this down to the bottom here so that it takes up less room. And we're going to change this bottom one here to the shader editor. So you should have something that looks like this. And we're going to go to the rendered view. Now, this is the base material, and it may look okay for a lot of you. If I remove this, you can see that there's really not much going on. If I turn on the lights, we still don't get to see a whole lot that's going on. What we're going to do to make this a little bit easier for the actual smoke part, we're going to be changing the background color. But right now, we're just going to look at this in sort of this black void here. If you go to your world settings, just change the color here to black and turn the strength down to 0, and it'll make sure it's totally black. And we're just going to take a look at the fire, and we're going to do that shading first, okay? And then we'll make some adjustments. So if you just take the flame here, and I kind of want to walk you guys through this. And just so you know, I am right now using 3.0. I checked, and everything from the previous 2.9 works just as well in 3.0. Everything I'm showing you works exactly the same in 3.0 as 2.9. So if you do have issues with 3.0, you can feel free to use 2.9, okay? So if we go here to the volume info, and we just have to think about this. What do I want to do? I want to change the flame color, okay? I want the flame to kind of react according to what I want it to be instead of it just being this standard average thing. I want to sort of control more of how this is actually functioning. And if we take the flame and we put this into, let's say, the emission color here, you don't really see a whole lot changing. Okay, and if I take it and put it into the black body intensity, it does change. And what we're actually going to be doing here is if we take that and we actually put this into the tint as well, you don't see any change. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to be changing the black body intensity here and the black body tint. Okay, so black body just basically means that if something has an emission like a fire or embers or something like that, that's the black body tint. Okay, and the black body intensity is just how intense that sort of emission is going to be. So what we'll want to do is we want to actually control the black body tint according to kind of what we want to do with it. Okay, and that's done more so through numerical values, but we're going to be using a color ramp to sort of portray the color changes. So if we take the flame here and we put that into the color ramp, and then we take that and we put it into the black body tint, you can see that it changes. And if we pull this around, you can see that the white and the black sort of changes how the overall emission is being affected there. Okay. But let's just change these values to something that we know is kind of in fire because we are going to use this color ramp for some other stuff. So let's take this one here and we'll make this sort of a blue color. Okay. You can keep it white if you want just to make it super white. Actually, let's just keep this one white for now. And we can change that color to a blue later if we'd like. So let's then add a flag with the little plus icon and drag it over here. And we're going to make this a yellow color. And let's make it all the way bright. Pull it over like this. And let's add another flag and make this one an orange color. And we will pop this up a bit. And you can see there that the color is actually changing the flame. Okay, looks pretty cool. And if we take the black, we can actually control that value. And if we take this, we can pull this around. Let's add one more here. Let's add a red right around here. And let's make this a little bit darker, something like this. Okay. So that is how we can control the actual black body tint of the flame. But I'm not super sold on all of this, but we're going to be doing some adjustments anyway. So one of the things that we can do is if we think about this, we kind of want the fire to react according to not just what the flame, the area that has the flame, but we want the temperature also, like how hot this thing is according to our simulation. We want the temperature and the flame to sort of be multiplied against each other because if we do that, the higher the temperature, the more the flame should be kind of like brighter, okay? And that will then change our black and white values to be reflected in here. So if we add a converter math node, or you can do Shift A and search right here, if you take this and instead of add, we change this to multiply and just sort of fit this in between the two, you can see that if we don't put anything in here, we can just multiply that value like this. And you can sort of change how intense the values are with this here. But what we actually want to do is we want to take the flame and multiply it by the temperature. And you can see there, it changes those values. So now the flame and the temperature are both being multiplied together to create sort of a more realistic flame effect because the flame quality should be also affected by the temperature. And what we can then do from there is we can take this, and if we duplicate this and put it right here, we can actually increase or decrease the intensity by changing the value. So we're basically just taking these values, multiplying against itself, and then we can use these flags here to change how the overall shading is being affected. And you can notice that once this gets super intense, these sort of don't end up doing that much with this. You can move this around, but once it's super, super high, it kind of, doesn't work exactly right. But you can see there we can multiply these values and then change how some of this intensity is working right in here. And keep in mind, we do have noise off right now, but once noise is applied, which we will do when we start doing some more finalized stuff here to check out the overall shading, you'll notice that this really does have a lot of effect on what's happening with our overall simulation. But let's save our rendering software a little bit right now by just doing this in this more low res version. Okay, so let's just put this aside for the moment, and we're just going to take this and move it down here like this. And you can notice that the temperature here, you can increase this as well. and you can see how bright that's getting, but we're not going to adjust that, at least not right now. But instead, what we're going to do is we're going to change this right here, the black body intensity, because we want to actually control how intense the black body emission is based on some factors. And you kind of wouldn't think about this unless someone told you, or you really, really started to think about math and the volume info node right here. But let's just kind of go from like the back. Okay, so let's say you wanted there to be more of an intense, or the black body emission to be more intense. You can change this value, either less or more, or you can say, well, I want this to be based on the flame. You could just take that and put it right in there, and you can see that that's what's happened there. Or you can take the temperature and say, I want it to be based on the temperature, and you can put that in as well, which will show you the results. So you can just take one of these and pop it in there and see some different results. But really, what we kind of want to do is we want to control more than just popping this in here. We want to really control the overall look of this and make it look a lot more interesting and unique. So, what we can do is we can say, okay, let's say we want to just overall take the flame quality and we're going to multiply that value by whatever we want. So we can take this and we can pop it way up like this, or we can take it and make it go way, way, way down to nothing. Okay, so we have now a control over the flame values just by adding this multiply node. Now, what's more interesting is we can actually, if we start thinking about this, we go, okay, well, we have the flame and we have the temperature. Okay, now, what we can do is we can actually control how much of the flame is actually visible based on what the temperature is. So if we say, okay, let's take this, and instead of putting the multiply into the flame, we'll just do the temperature here, and let's put that in there, okay? So we have a little bit of a different result because it's now based on the temperature instead of the flame value. But instead of multiply, what's really fun that we can do here is we can say, okay, what if we only wanted some, like basically part of the, whatever the temperature is to a certain value, we just want to see that and not the other. So if we just wanted to see the more brights, or we wanted to pull away some of the more bright areas to control that, what we can do here is we can take this and change this to a less than or greater than, depending on what you want to do. And we can take this and we can start to change this threshold. And you can see that if we put that in there, we're now taking any value that's the temperature that is less than this value is now showing up here. And you can make it go all the way so it looks like, the maximum threshold. And this is all based on your simulation, so your values here might be a little bit different depending on what you've done. But what's really awesome here is that we can now select some of this fire effect and then use those values to change some things so that our fireball has a very unique look to it, or a really cool look to it. At least it starts to look a little bit more unique, a little bit more interesting, and also a little bit more realistic depending on what kind of simulation you're trying to run. This might actually be more accurate to what kind of fireball effect you want it to look like. If it's a magical fireball or if it's just a regular realistic fireball, this might help you get more natural and realistic results because you're pulling away certain values that might not really look that great because it gives more detail as you pull away or add these values. So from here, what we can do is we can actually then take this value, the temperature with the less than or greater than, you can put a greater than in there as well. And then we can take the flame value and this, multiply that together, and then throw that into the black body intensity. And now we are multiplying the flame and this temperature that we are controlling. We're multiplying those together so that the flame parts get more. Basically, you are multiplying the positive values to the positive values to make them more bright. And then the less bright stuff is sort of falling away so that you get more of this sort of like stepped look to it. And then if we take that multiply node, duplicate that, and put it here, we can now multiply those values to make it look even more unique and interesting. So if I take this threshold and pull it way down like this, then we increase this by a lot, you can see that now we have a much more weird looking or unique, however you want to say it, fireball. And if we look at the color ramp here and we move these around, we can actually control these red values here. We can take this and pop this down to a black. You can do all kinds of things that will change the overall look of your flame. Let's change this back to a red value, put this down to about there, and put that like this. And since that doesn't really look that great, I'm also going to pull this multiply down a little bit, and we're going to take this less than and pop this up a little bit. And we're just going to do something like that there. That looks kind of neat for now. Okay. So the next thing that you can do, if you feel so inclined, is you can then take your whatever this is here. If you want to control with this black flag, you want to control not just the color effect, the black body intensity, but also what the or sorry, not just the black body tint, but you want to also control the black body intensity. What we can do is duplicate this multiply node like this, and then take your color ramp here and pipe that into there. And now you can see that those super red areas, just to show you again what this looks like, if we just take from this multiply node right here and put that into there, you can see there's all this red happening right here. So now we're taking this color ramp, multiplying it by this value here, putting that into the black body intensity. And now this black flag right here is now controlling the actual visibility of those sections. And if we pull that way over like this, pull this over like this, something like that, now we have a much more naturalistic and interesting looking fireball. And just to show you sort of like the difference between the two, if I duplicate my original principled volume and I just Control Shift left click through there, this is the original, and I have Node Wrangler on. That's how I was able to do that. So you can go to Edit, Preferences, and add Node Wrangler so you can do quick selections like this. But if we look through the original, this is what it looked like before. This is what it looks like now. It's a lot more interesting, unique, and in my opinion, a lot more realistic, especially when we start adding some smoke. So if we go here and we add the noise and let it take a moment here to see what it looks like with our high resolution, now you can really see how unique and interesting. So let's go to the principled volume, just the regular, looks like this, and the one where we have this more unique way of doing things, that is how it looks like there. Okay, so either way, whatever works for you is great, but this shows you how you can make your fireball a lot more customized according to what kind of simulation you're trying to run or animation. I'm going to keep the noise on a little bit right now, because when I move around with the rendered view, it is easy for me. But you may want to pop that back down by taking the noise off so that it's easier for you to move around in the viewport. But we're going to, let's actually just move this up a little bit, like up there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how you can actually change the fireball color. Okay. So you can see here that we have an emission color and emission strength. And if you just take the emission strength here and you set this to a 1, you can see that it starts to look really weird. You just get this voxely look and it kind of looks bad, okay? And that's because we actually need to control the emission strength based on some data. It doesn't automatically know what to set your emission as, so it's just assuming that the entire volume voxel data is what you want to have as an emission. Now we've already figured out what we want as the emission with this right here. So if we take this and we put this into the emission strength right there, you can see that there we now have just this fireball section that's set as the emission. And if we change this color right here to a blue or to a red or to a magenta color or to a green, you can control what the color looks like as a solid. But even more cool or more interesting is if we take this color ramp here and we duplicate this and put it right up here, and this is where things get a little bit crazy, so you'll have to forgive me when it comes to the node spaghetti that we're going to be creating here. And I will have this available to patrons if you are a patron and you want to have this already made for you. I will have this available to you through the Patreon, so you can see a link below for that. But if you take this value here, put it up right in there like that, and you can see here we basically have this duplicated. But on this one, let's change the yellow to a blue and the orange to a magenta and the red here to a green. And let's pop this up like this. And the black, let's make this, I don't know, yellow. And the white here, we can make this another weird color. And if we take that and put that into the emission color, then you can start controlling the actual color of your emissions by pulling these around. And you'll have to make sure that you use these values here to change the overall emission quality and the color, because remember, we're piping a bunch of stuff into this right here. So all of these values are going to adjust this, and it's going to adjust your black body intensity and the emission strength. If you want this to be unique and separate, you can always do something else, like take, let's say, the flame and put it into this, and then use this value here to move things around, and you can adjust based on that. You just have to make sure that when you do this sort of effect, that you're taking the same principles that we've applied here and here. So, for example, you could take this and put it into there, and you should have a little bit of a different result when you're piping these things in. See, I just took this one in and put it into there. You can see that there's quite a bit of a different result. So make sure that you take the same principles that we've applied to our black body tint, intensity, and that you can apply to your emission color and emission strength, okay? So I'm just going to disconnect these for now, because we really, for me at least, I don't really want to use that, but I just wanted to show you how you can adjust the overall color to something interesting. So at this point, we're just going to save this. So file save as, we're going to call this, I'm going to call this 4A. And we're going to start to deal with the smoke. Now with the smoke, what I've noticed is, and I'm just going to turn the noise off for right now. What I've noticed is that it does work a little bit easier if you have either lights on. So if I go here, and I actually do have the lights on here. If I take the density right here, just in the principled volume, and I left click and drag this up, there's the density. You can see it. It's right in there. Okay. It looks okay, but it's not great. And what makes this a little bit easier for us to see is if we actually take the background color, change this to a white, and then take the strength and make it a 1, we can actually take a look a little bit easier at the overall smoke volumes, because we've just got done with the fire. Now we want to take a look at the smoke. And this is okay, and this might work for you just to have the density pulled up right here. And you can see here that the density attribute is right there. But really, to me, this isn't good enough. And what we want to do is, again, take the same principles that we used here for the flame and the temperature, and we use that for our black body tint and the black body intensity. And what we want to do is we want to actually use this same idea for the density to control things. So let's just say that, we want the density of the smoke to be more sort of like back here instead of in the fireball. And we want the smoke just to be kind of like coming from the fireball instead of to be inside the fireball like it currently is. Okay. So let's say we want to do something like that. Well, what we need to do is we need to start doing some math. And I know math sucks. I don't like doing it myself, but we're going to use some math ideas that we've done down here at the bottom. And we're going to use that for the shading of this smoke effect as well. So what we'll do is we will take, I'm just going to duplicate this less than, and we're going to change this to subtract. And why am I doing subtract? Well, if we want to have the density of the smoke to be more not where the flame is, what we'll want to do is subtract the density and the flame, like this. And if we take this subtract and we put that into the density right here, we can see what happens. So you can see there's like nothing there, okay? Now, what if we flip these? Boom, like this. You can see that there's nothing there. But if we take the subtract, duplicate that, and change this to a multiply, and start to take this value and make it go up to a really high value like that, you can see that there we have the density minus the flame, and then we multiplied that by a very large value, and we got smoke coming out of the fireball, like this. Okay? Now, let's say that this was a little bit, too, this is cool, but you wanted more smoke to be inside the fireball. Now, what we can do here is in between the subtract and the multiply. If we duplicate the multiply, put it right here, and you can see there's an interesting effect when we did that. But if we change this to add, and we just change this to a 1, let's just say, and bring this down, you can see that we're adding now some volume density to this and then multiplying the value. So maybe you'll take the multiply and you'll pop it down to like a 1. And let's just take the add, and you can see here, when we're adding, you can see some is added here, and there's a little bit sort of added right here, but it's still really hard to see. And if we take this value and we start to bring this up, now you can start to see more of that smoke coming in. And when we change the add, and then add some multiply, you can see that we are now controlling a lot more of our smoke effect than we had control of before, which will allow you to make a more customized effect for your overall simulation. So another, just really quick, let's take a look at this, and we'll take the density and I'll put this at like a 50 for a, oh, looks like we already had one up here. So let's take this one that we already had. Move this down. Let's add some density, let's like a 50 or something. View through that. So there's the density at a 50. Let's pull it down to like a 10. It looks whatever. But if we look at it through the one that's customized, you can see that we have a lot more control and it's a lot easier to see where everything is. And you can then increase all of these here. You can increase your temperature here to make your fireball a lot brighter. You can take the less than and pull it up a little bit more if you want, so that more of the fireball is actually visible there. And if we take a look at this with the noise on, so let's turn the noise on really quick so we can see what it looks like at a high detail. You can see how cool that looks there. Okay. So let's take, now that we have the high, the high quality on with the noise here, we can now start to make some other adjustments. So let's take the multiply, pull it down a bit, take the add and pull it down a bit to maybe, I don't know, something like this right here. And maybe pull the multiply up. And that looks pretty cool. Okay. So the other thing that we can do is we can change the color of the smoke. And the same idea applies as we had before. Let's just move this. So hopefully you guys can see this up here. But most of this information is, in the node editor. So I'm hoping that you guys are all, really, getting a lot out of this here instead of just what's in my renderer. But inside of the principled volume, you can see that there's a color here. And if we make this red, the smoke turns red. So that might be cool. You're like, okay, done, cool. Or blue, or, this turquoise color, or whatever it is that you'd like. But as with everything else, this is dependent on a black and white value. If you look through any of these are basically controlling black and white values. These multiply nodes, these are, black and white float values, or, ones that are based on a decimal point instead of an integer value, which is a solid 1 or 2 value. So what we can do here with the color right here is you can take the density or any of the outputs from any of this stuff you've done here. And let's say that we just took this color ramp. Whoop, right there. Whoops, let's put that back in there. If you take this value right here, and you take this color ramp right here, and you pipe it into the color, you will have control over the actual smoke color that's based on this density information. So if I take this and I make this blue, and let's just delete a couple of these, this one too, and have this be a green value, you can see that we're controlling that. And if we pull this over, and you can see there's a limitation here because the value here is so high that it's actually not allowing us to control this very much. So let's try taking it just from the volume info and putting it right in there. And when we do that, look at that. Look how cool that looks. So now, based on the overall density of the smoke, you can have transitioning effects from one color into another color. You can add a magenta value here that's in between the two. And if we pull some of these over, we can have some really interesting color combinations happening depending on the side that we're looking at. So you can see there's a lot of transitioning elements. Or you can change this to black and white values. So let's take out all of the saturation. You can actually take right here where it says saturation. You can just pull this down and it will automatically set it to a gray value. So saturation, and let's make this, let's say black. So now we have black and white smoke values that are all being controlled by our density right here, which can make this look really, really cool. And depending on the kind of simulation or final animation that you're trying to do, this can make your particular simulation look incredibly different from anyone else who's done this before. So you're going to have some really, really awesome color combinations just by taking these colors and or taking your density and changing the overall color of your smoke right there. Now, the other thing that you could potentially do here is you can animate your colors. So let's say on one frame you want the volume to have the particular density of your volume to be black, and then you go okay. Let's say frame 20. We can we can right click here, insert keyframe on our black value. Sorry, let me make this a little bit bigger. So I just made this a keyframe. You can see it's yellow now, or at least hopefully you can see there's a yellow outline there. So now let's go to frame 40. And this is slow because we have the noise setting on, so it's loading everything up. So let's change this value to a blue, and we can right click, insert keyframe. And now when we go to frame 35, it should transition between those values. So you can see it animating there. So that's pretty cool. And depending again on your simulation, you may or may not want to do this, but it does look really cool when you start to really play with this stuff and get very, very interesting results. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm just going to delete these keyframes because I'm really not going to do that for this particular tutorial or for, this final. And we'll just keep it as this blue. Actually, let's just make it a regular black and white. So we can do something like this. So just a regular black and white, just so that it's a little bit easier for us to see some stuff. And the other way that we can control the coloring of our smoke simulation is also through the lights. Okay, so let's take the background and we're going to take the color in the back and we're going to put this back down to a black color and take the strength and put it to a 0. And now, if we take a look at our two point lights, so this one up here and this one right here, and we go to our light properties, we can actually change these settings. You can see right now it's at an orange, and if I change this and it's at 1000 watts, if I change this to a purple, let's just say, you can see that now it's colored as a purple color. And then on this side here, I can change this to a green. And now I have green and purple. And if I take the volume here and I change these colors as well, I make a red, and this one here, let's actually make this one a red. And this one we can make a blue, and take this and move it down a little bit. You can see that we can get a whole bunch of different types of colors going on, and I'll just pop these up. Let's actually make this a little bit less intense of a green, and let's just turn up the wattage a little bit more. And then for this one here, let's turn up the wattage a little bit more as well. And we'll change the purple, let's say to a yellow or something. And you can see that you can get a lot of variation in your color by changing your light sources and changing the volume smoke there. And at this point, what you'll want to do is take your fire and your smoke and just adjust all of this stuff with noise on to do some final tweaks. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then next we're going to do the sparks. All right, so now let's handle our sparks. So what we'll do here is we will actually turn off our smoke domain just to make this a little bit easier. We're going to turn off the fireball path, and let's turn off our lights as well. And let's turn on the sparks. Like that there. And we'll just select those and let's zoom in a little bit. And you can see that we have these little tiny guys. And if you don't know how to make these, make sure you watch my other tutorials on how to make this. But basically we have this sort of set here. And if we look at this in the rendered view, you can see that there's all of our sparks, and they just have one color right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this color over the lifetime of the particle so that we get more of an animated look that would be more accurate with what would happen with a fireball and smoke or actual sparks, okay? So what we'll do is we need to take our sparks object, which if we select this and we zoom in on it, you can see that it's this icosphere that's been duplicated. And if we take the emission and we turn the strength down, you can see that we're just making it more orange, okay? And more bright. And if we take the temperature here and we turn it down, or if we can actually bring it all the way down, you can see that it's red to an orange color. Okay, so basically the strength here and the black body color temperature is kind of doing the same thing. And it's not really changing it over time. So let's select the sparks again. I'm going to hit period to zoom in. And let's start to adjust this. And in order for us to adjust it, we'll zoom in on our sparks particle effect, but we need to have our spark object selected in order to change this. So that might be a little bit strange if you're not used to doing this, but basically we need to adjust the shading on our spark object, not the spark simulation itself, since the simulation is duplicating this object. And what we want to do is we want to take some particle information and kind of taking the same idea that we did with our volume information from the smoke and fire simulation. We kind of want to take those same principles and apply it here to our particle field. So what we'll want to do is do a search for particle info. So if you hit Shift A, search for, and just start typing in particle, we're going to bring in some particle info. Okay, so we have all this information here. And you can see that we have age and lifetime. And what we want to do is we want to take the age and the lifetime, and we want to use this information to make the particles get dimmer and eventually fade out as time goes on or as they get older, because sparks, the older they are, the more they will lose the ember heat, and they'll turn into sort of like a just a piece of just a piece of particle or something like that, and we technically won't really see that anymore. Okay, so what we'll do here is we're going to add a converter math node, and what we're going to do is we're going to divide these values. So we're going to take the age and we're going to divide it by the lifetime. And then we're going to add a converter color ramp to change the color of our object. And at this point, we are going to get rid of our black body because we're not going to be using this. We're going to be putting this into here, and we're going to be changing our color here. Let's do a black on this side over here, and then on, add another flag here. Let's make this more of an orangey color, like this. And let's hit plus to add another flag, and we're going to make this one more of a yellowy color to be kind of like a brighter color effect. And let's take this and let's just pipe this into here and see what happens, okay? And you can see there that once we do that, we now have a changing of our particle. The brighter ones are at the head of our fireball because it's the youngest of the particles. And if we sort of click through here, you can see that it follows. So if we press play, we can see that as time goes on, they transform from one color to another at this end over here. And if we take the black and we pull this over, you can see that less and less. Let's actually turn this off so you can see more. The overlays here, if I turn that off, and I move these over and I take the black and I pull it like this, you can see that it's less and less visible. Okay. So as the time goes on, we have particles that fade out. And then as they are younger, they are this particular color. And if we add another flag here, you can even make some of these a white color if you like. So if you think that it should be a white color or a blue color or something like that, whatever colors you want, you can actually change all of these to make it magical like that, or whatever color is that, or whatever the color is that you'd like it to be, you can change all of these. But we're just going to keep this as I had it before. So maybe a darker red color here, have this be a yellow color, And maybe this very, very tippy top one will have a brighter sort of yellowy color like that, maybe that cream color there, and it looks pretty cool. Now, let's say that you wanted to just, increase this, the sort of like visibility of this, or you wanted to just sort of, alter the age to lifetime values and make them die off quicker, I just duplicated this divide here, change this to a multiply, and then we can multiply this, and you can see that we're actually changing the lifetime values according to this multiplication value right here. Now, the other thing that we're going to want to do here is to save our computer, because remember, if I change this to a white and I put the strength up to a 1, oh, it's like barely visible. But you can see if I zoom in, you can see these little black dots right here. So the renderer is actually going to render these little black dots. And we don't want to render things we're really not going to see, because you might end up with little black dots all over your image that you don't know why they're there. So we actually want these ones that have basically been burned out, these embers that are burned out here, we want to make this so that they're no longer visible. All right. So all we really need to do is we're going to add a shader here, or a mix shader and then a different shader to get rid of all of these little guys here. Okay, so let's add a shader, and this is going to be a transparent shader, and let's put it right here. And we'll add shader, mix shader like this, put these in here like that, and then take this shader and put it into the surface. And you can see that when we do this, if we take this factor and we move it from one side to the other, it's either all there or it's all transparent. Okay, so this is basically a switch between the two. So we need something that controls so that these black values go away. Okay, and all we really need to do at this point is we can take these right here and put it into the factor, but you can see that it's reversed. See that there? And if you take this and you put it into there, they all kind of go away. So what we want to do is let's actually just take a multiply node, and we'll take this right in here, and we'll take this right in here. And since you can see here that you see the black is visible, but these aren't. If we flip these, see that? And we move the transparent down here, and we multiply this value, we can actually control the transparency like this. And what we can also do is we can add a converter, color ramp like this, and move these values like this or like this to make them more or less visible. So using this multiply node and this color ramp like this here, we can control the visibility of those black particles and the overall particle effect as well with this mix shader, this transparency, and these nodes here. And let's change this back to a black, change the strength here to a 0. And now we have this particle effect that happens like this, where everything disappears as it gets older and goes away, so we don't have to worry about rendering that stuff out. Then if we turn everything else on here, all of our point lights and our sparks and our wall, let's just turn the wall on here and go to the rendered view. And let's actually change this so that the domain, let's turn back on our noise here so we get a really high quality effect. Let's turn this onto the rendered view. And let's take a look a little bit closer. And you can see that now we have our particles here that are mixed along with all of our fire effect that's happening here. And at this point, I would say you want to go in and you want to go to your smoke domain, and you might want to, at this point, take your density and pull it down a little bit so we can see those particle effects a little bit better. Maybe you want to take your fire effect and maybe pull this down a little bit more and give that a little bit more control so we can see more of the particle effects. Or you can go to the spark object here, and we can increase the strength to be a lot higher if we'd like, so that they're a little bit more visible throughout our scene. And remember that when we go into the rendered part of this tutorial series, which is going to be next, it's going to be a little bit more obvious where these are, because we're going to add a little bit of a motion blur right here. so that these have this really cool streaky look to them. So there's that. And what we can also do here is take these lights and let's just pop these down because they're a little bit strong. So let's make it maybe 500 and maybe this one here 200. Oops, that's 2000. And let's take the wall here and I'm just going to add a black base coat to this so that we get this kind of cool effect here. And I'm going to take the roughness and I'll pull it down a little bit so we can see more of the reflection. And what we can see here is we have this really cool reflected effect happening here. We have our sparks, we have our high quality flame and smoke simulation, and you can take your smoke domain, pull all these values around to whatever you would like it to be. So you can see there that they show up a little bit easier because you have the red particles there, you have your yellow particles that are right here near the fireball front, and we have that cool reflected look on our wall. And if we go more to a position or a part of the timeline where it actually hits the wall, let's see how cool that looks. And we can look and see how neat that looks. So from this point here, basically what I would recommend that you do is you go into your flame and your smoke density and everything else and get this looking really nice and customized to how you want it to look. Change all of your elements to your shading to have it be where you think it looks really awesome. And next time, we will be going over how to efficiently, or at least as efficiently as possible, render out your single images and your animation for this scene and some compositing techniques. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time on DJ Tutorials.